It is the start of a new year, and the labor market is all over the headlines. Story after story and anecdote after anecdote about what is happening with jobs and careers, particularly as the world begins to embrace AI. And at LinkedIn, we saw an opportunity to create clarity based on the data that's happening on our platform today. 1.3 billion members and 70 million companies around the world on LinkedIn. And we think that clarity is going to be helpful for everyone to make decisions, whether you're making a decision about your career or as a leader, how to run your business in the year ahead. Now, I'm not going to make any predictions. I'm just going to share what we're seeing right now on the platform to inform your own strategy and thinking. Now, at a high level, the first thing is that global hiring, it's still sluggish. And it's lower than pre-pandemic levels. That's being felt across most industries and geographies, not all, but fairly broadly. It's being experienced across both more senior hires and entry-level roles. And if you dig into what is happening to drive that, it appears that it is related to the macroeconomic environment and interest rates as opposed to AI. I know there's a lot in the headlines about is AI impacting hiring, but it broadly is being felt across industries based on the interest rate environment primarily. Now, the thing that is interesting is that AI is creating over 1.3 million new jobs around the world. We're calling this new collar economy because we are seeing it both in infrastructure of the build out of data centers, and we're also seeing it as companies are embracing AI capabilities to navigate into the new environment. So there's a ton more to share, but let's dig in. Overall hiring has slowed down from a high in about 2021, 2022. And we have continued to see a softening in the amount of hiring that is happening around the world. As that's happened and the job market's gotten more competitive, we've seen job seekers compete for fewer jobs. More job seekers are applying to more jobs at a higher rate in order to land that next position. And so while hiring has to some extent stabilized over the last year, it is continuing to soften and it is still below what we saw prior to the pandemic. Now, if you dig in and look at this around the world in different countries and in different industries, most countries and industries have a softer hiring environment that we saw pre-pandemic, but there are pockets of growth. And so let me share with you a few examples of that. India and the UAE have had hiring increases. Most of the economies in Western Europe and the US and Australia, they are hiring at a slower rate than what we saw in pre-pandemic times. And from an industry perspective, healthcare, education, consumer services, those have been the hiring markets with most positive trends. But by and large, across areas like technology, consulting, professional services, we have seen a decline in the volume of hiring that's going on relative to what we saw before the pandemic. Now let's dig into what's happening specifically in terms of why India is disproportionately growing. We've charted out over the last decade, from 2015 to 2025, how much hiring globally headquartered companies are hiring in India. And it has grown from roughly 2 or 3% to 6 to 8% on a global basis. And so part of the reason that we're seeing an increase in hiring in India is that the companies, as they think about their global footprints, they are placing more of their roles in India. They are figuring out how to operate their businesses and their teams globally. So one of the things that we've done is we have not just cut hiring by country, but by company size. In all of these countries, hiring with small businesses has been more resilient than with enterprises. This is basically happening around the world. And one of the things that's driving that, we've looked specifically at the Fortune 100, is that these organizations have learned how to grow their businesses without needing to grow their headcount commensurately. Leveraging technology, operating more efficiently, they have been able to grow revenue per headcount substantially over the last several years. Let's talk about what's driving the slowdown in hiring, particularly in the US. And the trend that we see is that it is correlated with interest rates as opposed to AI. And so what we've done here is we've plotted out overall hiring levels relative to interest rates adjusted for inflation. And what you see is that as interest rates went up, you saw hiring continue to slow down and keep slowing down as we continue to be in an elevated interest rate environment. Now, one of the questions that we often get is, well, is this being experienced at a higher level, this slowdown at a higher level for roles exposed to AI versus ones that are less exposed to AI? And what we find is that they follow the same trend. If you look at AI adoption within a role, whether that's in engineering, accounting, real estate, if you look at AI adoption, it does not correlate with the change in overall hiring experienced within that function. In fact, these functions follow very similar curves, being sensitive to interest rates as opposed to being sensitive to AI adoption. The other thing that we looked at is there's this narrative going on that entry-level roles are being disproportionately impacted by AI and the current environment, and that's not what we see in the data. When we plot out hiring for entry-level roles, it looks very similar to the trend line that we see for overall hiring and experienced roles. And so to the extent that it's a very tough environment for new college grads to get their first job, it's really because the overall hiring environment is challenged as opposed to something specifically happening with hiring of entry-level jobs. And specifically, we looked at this for software engineers. This has been one of the questions that people have had around the degree to which software engineering new grads are specifically exposed to what's going on in the macro environment and AI. And what we find is that hiring for software engineers for entry level looks very similar to what is happening with experienced software engineering hiring. The challenge is that the number of people graduating with computer science degrees has not adjusted. Computer science graduates continues to hit an all-time high on a global basis, even as hiring has fallen. So it is a very tough environment for new computer science graduates, but it appears that that is being driven by the overall hiring environment, by interest rates, as opposed to something specifically happening with AI. Okay, so we talked about how the overall hiring market is slower, and that's primarily being driven by interest rates as opposed to AI. But there is a way that AI is impacting the jobs being created around the world. There is a new wave of high-skilled jobs being created around the world associated with AI, and that is happening in a number of categories. We call this the new collar era because there are completely new jobs and opportunities being created by the adoption of AI around the world. Now, that's in roles from technicians that are building out data centers, to data annotators that are helping to train models, to forward deployed engineers that are helping organizations adopt new AI technology and train that technology for their specific organization. We expect this trend to continue because leaders believe that AI is making their organizations more efficient, and professionals know that learning AI skills not only makes them more capable in their jobs, but is going to be a critical part of their career going forward. So when we zoom out and we look at all of the skills that are growing on the platform, we see them in two primary categories. It is the technical skills that are associated with AI fluency and building and deploying AI technology, and it is the human skills that are going to allow all of us to work together as we navigate more change than we have ever seen in our careers. So I'm going to share one more trend that we see on the platform that's happening around the world, and that is the rise in creator jobs. Over 4 million professionals around the world on LinkedIn list full-time roles as creators. And this is a 90% increase in terms of people putting creator on their profile on LinkedIn relative to what we saw in 2021. Creators are becoming a more important of the global economy because trust is so important. And particularly as we embrace a world of AI and it becomes important to know what's real and who you can turn to, creators are becoming the trusted voices that people are turning to make decisions both in their professional lives and in their personal lives. It's also showing up as some of the most aspirational jobs for Gen Alpha. And so as they enter the workforce, you're going to see more people try to become creators as their full-time profession. And we're going to see more organizations embrace in creators as they build connection with their communities and their customers. When you step out and you look at all of this together, there is a clear narrative. And it's a narrative that we hope will help you in your career or as you lead your company make decisions in 2026. We are in a slower hiring environment that is being felt in countries around the world, in a variety of industries in companies of all sizes. Now, there are pockets of growth, but by and large, it is a slower environment than what we saw pre-pandemic, and that change is being driven primarily by interest rates as opposed to AI. AI is creating a whole new category of new collar jobs. 1.3 million jobs on LinkedIn associated with new AI capabilities in data center buildouts, in model training, and helping organizations adopt new technologies. And we expect these trends to continue. As more happens in the world, we at LinkedIn look forward to sharing with you more information to help create an ongoing sense of clarity so we can all make decisions for our careers and for our organizations. Thank you to the incredible team that put this analysis together. If you want to dig deeper, please check out the report that I've shared in the comments. And thank you to the 1.3 billion members on LinkedIn and the 70 million companies that engage on the platform that help make all of this insight possible.